So this is the tense part where everyone files in, but it is 6 o'clock. I know I started this right at 6 o'clock, so people are just filing in. But I think for the sake of moving on, I will go ahead and start the webinar at 6:01. How's that? Welcome to the British Empire Study Group, tonight's June 11th meeting. Everyone here, everyone is welcome. You don't have to be a member or anything. You just have to have an interest in tonight. It's actually very interesting. Okay, our next presentation is about plating the penny reds. Okay.
Take out your reds and forget the blacks. Let's plate.
Okay, so that's the next one. If you want to hear the rest of the song, you have to show up in July. The next, so now, without any further ado, I am going to turn it over to my co-host, Rob Lutens, to introduce tonight's speaker, Stan Brown, and I think you have a big treat in store for you. So, Rob, it's all to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Welcome, everyone, to the June British Empire Study Group webinar, a computer app for identifying and comparing colors with Stanley Brown. Identifying the precise color of a given stamp has long been a challenge for philatelists, affecting both the value and the historical context of certain stamps. Differing naming conventions by catalog publishers that have also changed over time in their descriptions has caused confusion in the hobby. Since the printing of the first stamp, the penny black, being able to identify the exact color or shade of a stamp has been an issue. The penny black, for example, has 3 listed shades in the Stanley Gibbons catalog: intense black, black, and gray black. The difference in monetary value between these 3 shades can run from hundreds to thousands of dollars, depending on the shade and the condition, thus making a correct color identification critical. And so it has ever been since for countless stamps of varying color from all over the world. Digitization and scanning advances have eliminated the need for naming conventions and given philatelists a tool to make accurate comparisons to a reference. The use of flatbed scanners for color analysis is now approaching 30 years. But the time has come when color analysis has left the laboratories and reached the home hobbyist. Stanley Brown has developed an app for scanners he calls Stamped Z that will work on most operating systems. It's intended to take advantage of a common accessory used with many home computers. Its function is to make accurate pixel-based measurements of colors. The color data can be then saved into a user-built color library where it can be compared to other stored samples. The app contains tools that can crop and level images, make precise pixel-based dimensions, and determine perforations. These functions are independent of the sampling and color analysis functions and can be used separately. It also contains a number of analytical tools for analyzing groups of data and can be applied to determine how similar or different those colors are. Just a heads up, for those of you with a continuing interest in color identification, our upcoming September webinar is going to feature Richard Judge, who will present recent applications of spectroscopy in philately. So it's another slant on color identification. A few words about our presenter this evening, Stanley Brown. Now retired, Stan worked during the early part of his professional career in construction, also spending time with the state fish and game fisheries, working on selective breeding and endangered species. The last 32 years were spent in the high purity and sanitary application industry: food, beverage, biofarm, semiconductors, and water, mainly in management and sales manufacturing. Stan began collecting stamps in 1959 and has been a member of the American Philatelic Society since 1984. He's also a member of the Sacramento Philatelic Society, the Great Britain Philatelic Society, the Belgian Philatelic Circle, and the Perfin Club Nederland. His collecting interests are mainly Western European countries with an emphasis on color varieties. Many of you will already know Stan from his thousands of postings for the online group, The Stamp Forum, where he's been an important contributing member for several years. He's also an assistant editor for the excellent monthly Stamp Forum newsletter. He's known on the forum by his nickname, Stainless B. His interest in color began 7 years ago. His involvement in analytics and such was driven as much by necessity as curiosity. He's not formally trained in color science or software development. So without further ado, I give you our esteemed presenter this evening, Stanley Brown.
Greetings, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world. I thank you for coming. I'm much thanked to Rob and Joan for asking me to be here. The presentation I'm going to give tonight is an overview of the application. There's a lot of moving pieces. I'm going to move relatively quickly, and some areas I'm only going to briefly touch on. We could turn this into a 3 or 4 hour seminar without too much problem. It requires a scanner and a computer. The application was built out of necessity more than my desire to learn how to use Python coding and make it so it works for everybody else's computer. So hopefully this works, and here we go. All right. Okay. The start is, everybody wants to know what exactly is StampZ. And by the way, I'm not going to read all of these slides verbatim because I'm assuming everybody here can probably handle that on their own. So I'm just going to, some things I'll say more about, other things not as much. At the bottom of each slide, you'll see a number. If you have a question at the end, jot down the number that the question applies to. It'll make it much easier to get back and look at it if we need to. So when we talk about what StampZ is, it's easier at first to talk about what it's not. Although it's an application that is built using Python code and AI assistance, it will not tell you what kind of stamp you have. It's not going to tell you what color it is. The color library has to be built by you, and then it's a comparative tool. It works on all platforms. However, my apologies to people who still have a Mac computer with an Intel chip in it. Apple has deprecated the bundling software for this, so I have no way of bundling anything for the earlier units. Down below, and I'll show this link again at the end, that's a link where you can get this. This is a free app. There's no charge for it. You can use it to, as Rob said, level and crop images. You can determine perforations using something that most people will think looks pretty familiar. Accurate measurements, and they are based on the pixel count, so it's important that you scan at a consistent setting on your scanner, and it will also do bulk processing of images to a preset size. So say you have 25 stamps of the same definitive denomination. So rather than having to go through them one by one, you can bulk process them, and based on a initial target stamp where it'll pick up some landmarks and go from there. Perforations and obliterations, cancellations can play havoc with it, but mentioning that, you don't have to have mint stamps for color analysis. Most of the inks are quite color fast and steady over the years, and they work just fast, and there's just as much variation in them as there are in a mint stamp. And honestly, a 100-year-old stamp, we don't know how it was stored. We don't know whether it ever got sat in a windowsill for an afternoon or not. Picked up some rays, got a little tan. The app itself will sample up to 6 areas. You don't have to sample 6. You can set it, as we'll see in a minute, for fewer. It has multiple color values systems that it uses. LAB, which is C-Lab, RGB, CMY, which is not real common for what we do. It's more of a printer setup, and what's called L chroma hue format, lightness chroma hue. Some people like that. I've tried to make this as diversified as possible, and quite honestly, with the with the Python coding, a lot of these things are already built as modules. So just a matter of trying to make them all work nicely with each other. The colors are sampled. You save the samples. You can save all of them or a few of them, and you can have them average. I find myself the averaging works better because if you sampled 100 stamps and you took samples on each one, 600 samples can be a lot to deal with. 100 is a little bit easier and avoids having quite so many blobs on your plot. The color analysis, there's an internal SQL database. It is limited in what it can do, but it does a great job of storing data. And data can be exported to ODS, LibreOffice, Calc, or XLXS, Excel format. And both LibreOffice and Excel will open the other format without any issues. And the resulting colors, you can save into libraries that you name yourself. You can edit the libraries, you can merge, you can delete, you can export. Exported libraries or comma separated values. And that's how you would send your library if you want to share it to somebody else. And comparison is based on the swatches that you save. So once you get your results from your stamp, you can compare it to what you have. The data analysis goes to a format that looks like this, regardless of whether it's a SQL, an ODS, or XLXS. This is very important. The salmon color area you see at the top is basically for the computer calculations themselves. If you write anything in there, you'll just get errors other than the data ID. You can actually name what data does show up there when it populates it. But the spreadsheet is really important for the plotting, and otherwise you just have a bunch of numbers and the graphs don't work. So the data is stored in whatever format you select. And we'll go through the preferences in a moment. The exported data can be as a whole value or normalized. Normalized value is basically mathematically adjusted so it has a maximum or a minimum of 0.0 and a maximum of 1. Whereas the ranges of the different colored standard systems are much larger. And this works better for plotting because it basically scales in the size of your axis. So it's not quite so large. And the format of a spreadsheet, this works with a 3D scatter plot. It works with a ternary plot, and it works with a polar plot. Pretty universal in the format. There is also a way to do channel masks, RGB or CMY, for the people that like that style and using with like GIMP to extract the data from it. So pretty versatile. Getting started. When you first start the program, you will get a screen that looks like this. Looks like quite a few screens out there. The gray panel to the right side is the user interface. I'll mention this again later. Whenever you open this window, it's always there. You cannot get rid of it. And it will open at times with more controls and less controls. But the first thing when you run it the very first time is up at the top menu bar, you want to click on the Help tab. And the next thing is you're going to click on Preferences. This brings up an array of things, and you only have to do this once. I want to stress that. Unless you want to make changes, you only have to do this one time, and it doesn't take long. The first screen, the migration, all this does is sense as if you have an earlier version of Stamp Z on your computer so that it can export your existing data, your libraries, any templates that you have, and any databases that you already have. It moves it into this. It is non-destructive, so it leaves the old data with the earlier version. But if you do upgrades, as long as it's in the same hierarchy of Stamp Z3 right now, everything in Stamp Z3 would overwrite the previous one. If I were to change to a Stamp Z4, the Stamp Z3 would remain there for at least a little while, mainly as a fail-safe so you can fall back if something doesn't work. The next screen is image dialogues, and this is pretty straightforward. If you want to remember the last place you looked when you were opening files, you can click the box. You can even designate down below if you want to tell it. Otherwise, it'll remember it after you do it the first time if you check the little blue box. Next comes the spreadsheet export. This is where you're going to export your any data that you export it so you can find it. You don't have to go hunting for it. You can change it to your own setting, and you can change this at any time. The template form below is basically a name and a date, and it's pretty straightforward, but you can change it to anything you want. You know, my favorite color, whatever, doesn't matter. The computer doesn't care. It's just a name for it. Spaces are not preferable. It's better to put an underscore. A dash is okay, but an underscore is better. The next thing is going to be how it exports. Do you want it to open the exported file after you export it? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Most of the time, you probably are going to want it to open so you can see how it looks and what's on it. And then the export color values, whether or not they're normalized to 0, between 0 and 1 or not. If you don't check this box, they will be the full value. It will still plot in the different plots, but the range becomes very large. Including paper tag. I have it set up now, and this is somewhat in a test mode, but for testing the different colors of the papers or under tintings, I collect France. The type Sage had a lot of under tinting, kind of as a strategy to deter counterfeiters. So there's a host of varieties where the undercolor changes as well as the printed color. So if you want to just sample the paper, it will mark it with a P so you can see in your data which ones is color and which is not. And down at the bottom, you can choose how you want it to export data. You can choose all three or just one, doesn't matter. It's up to you. Next, we get how do you sample. This is to make it easier and the workflow a little bit better. You can set the default library, so when you save the color, it's going to go to whatever default library you set. If you already have a template made, you can call out what template, and when you load the template, that'll be at the top of the list. And the database name, you can set it, and this is important so that your data gets automatically saved when you hit the save button and goes to a place that you can find later. Although this may sound really complicated, once you do it, it's done, and then after you have to change it, you get the hang of it pretty quickly. Now, for your sampling, you have your choices of rectangles or squares. It'll just say rectangle, or circles. That's really up to you. The size is the pixel size. So if you have scanned at 600 dots per inch, a 10 by 6 is a pretty small area. There are pros and cons for why you should have larger areas and smaller areas. The jury's out on what works best. One thing is that with a really small area, it's a minimum number of pixels. You may be getting unprinted areas or areas that did not have proper inking. A larger area may tend to filter that out somewhat. The anchor there is just where your cursor, when you drag the sample around, grabs it. That's all that is. You can put it in the center. If it's a rectangle or a box, you can put it top left, top right, bottom left. And then maximum number of samples. It goes up to 6. You can change that. And remember, you can come back and change these at any time. And you only need to change one. It's not like you have to go through all the steps. For measurement, you can decide that you want to save the average colors or not. I find it easier, but not everybody likes to do things like I do. And by the way, how I'm approaching this, for all I know, may not be the right method, but there's not a lot to go on in color analysis in terms of computers and scanners. There's a lot of papers out there on using scanners and computers for color analysis, but it has nothing to do with stamps. For the measuring, here you just set what you would scan at, so it's accurate. And then at the background, you can set your default color. This is predominantly for your perforation gauge. I use black. that works well. If you happen to be working with some of the German stamps that have black paper around the edge of the perforation, you might want to set it to white. And now here for your debug. When you first get it, I ask everybody to click this box. What this does is it saves a readout in a text file, and they're very small, so that if you have any issues, if you send that to me with a brief description of what happened, maybe a screenshot of the error that came up or something, it makes it a lot easier for me to try to find it. Unfortunately, a lot of the bugs have been worked out by now. And last, we have the workspace. You can see here that I have now built up quite a few different databases, libraries, sampling templates. I don't want to have to scroll through all of these every single time I'm trying to do something. So I can highlight the ones that I want to see when I'm working. I can name it whatever I want so I can remember it. And I can delete it if I don't like it. When I delete it, all it does is remove the highlights. It's non-destructive. It's like erasing a chalkboard. Next thing, and there is scanner calibration, and this is in the first tab, the same place you would find it for file. And this is something I'm working on. It seems to work fairly well. The target that you see at the right, that is actually a physical target that I had printed with the idea of I would know what the colors are. I send it to someone, they scan it, they take it into StampZ, they analyze the whole thing, and there's a algorithm to read that, so it does it all at once. And then it makes a normalization adjustment based on those colors. Works much the same way that the targets work for the IT8 targets, or the Fujifilm or Kodak or those kind of things. It's been interesting doing this because I discovered that even the better printers in town have a real difficulty accurately printing some colors. But this is something that if you're interested, you need to contact me. I will send it out to you. It's just it'll look like a gift card when you get it, not very big, and take it from there. And then what it allows is you can send me your profile results and a scan that you took on your scanner and computer, and in StampZ, it will analyze it the same way as if I was actually on your computer with your scanner, because that's been one of the big bugaboos with using scanners for color analysis is they all are not the same. They don't see all colors the same way. But this is my approach on how to make that better and make it easier so we can share data. So not everybody doesn't have to build an entire color library from scratch just to get something going. All right, so now back to here. We jumped through that. You're now ready to do something. Again, here's your main window that opens up. The user interface, it always stays open. But first, I want to talk a little bit about scanning. Most of us have consumer grade flatbed scanners, and most of those have CIS sensors, which is called contact image sensor. It's less expensive to produce, but it's considered best for documents and high volume scanning. The stamp must be flat against the glass. If it's not flat, it will distort the colors that the sensor picks up. A CCD, which is a charge couple sensor, these are on more expensive scanners and also some of the photo scanners. It does small format for photographs and slides, but some of the upper end Epsons, we're offering them. They offer better color recognition and depth. They will actually scan 3D objects. They are slower, and unfortunately, because of expense, Epson has pretty much discontinued all but their archival grade unit, which is about $5,000. So there are some best practices. These are my opinions. You may disagree. May think some are unnecessary. First one, clean the glass. Every time especially if you're putting stamps on your scanner with your hands, you're putting little oil marks on there. Scanners are reflective, so anything in between the stamp and the sensor is going to cause you some background, some noise, or some basically flawed results. The lid, I like a flat black mat for it. In my case, mine came with a white covering. I just took it off and spray painted it flat black. That worked pretty well. Other people will just tape a piece of black construction paper on there. If you find that white works better, more power to you, or any other color for that matter, as long as you have a contrast. Put your stamps right on the glass. Do not use a Barrio or a stockholder, no matter how new it is, because scanners are reflective. That little thin piece of plastic is also a bit reflective. Most of you have probably noticed when you see it at an angle that glancing the light will reflect right off it. It also causes a little bit of shift in the color. If you are using ViewScan, which is a third-party app, or I think it's kind of similar to Silverfast as well, there are a couple things using it. In that, you can set your color balance to neutral. And if you can calibrate with an IT target, great. They work really well. It really helps, and you'll notice a difference. One thing about the target that I have for Stamp Z, it only works with Stamp Z. It does not physically change how your scanner scans the image. It only changes how Stamp Z sees it. If you're not using a ViewScan or Silverfast, if you can turn off color corrections on your scanner, I would recommend that you do that. Most of them are the manufacturer's idea for making a good photograph, which may not necessarily be great for your stamps. I found 600 to 800 DPI is more than adequate for most stamps. If you have a very thin line engraved stamp, like say perhaps the penny red or something along that lines, 1200 DPI may help because it just gives you a little more meat on the thickness of the line for placing your markers. I realize that makes a bigger file, but if you're looking for accuracy, that's what I would suggest. If you're not using ViewScan and you can set to 48-bit RGB, I recommend it. What that is 3 16-bit channels, one for the red channel, one for the green, and one for the blue. The difference between 24-bit or what's called 8-bit is about 256 colors versus a little over 4,000 colors that they're able to capture. So there's a big change in the number of different color variations. TIFF is preferred. If you're using ViewScan, turn the compression off. I'm not sure if Silverfast has it or not. TIFF does not compress. It's considered lossless. It is larger. Ping's an okay alternative. It does make for smaller files, and there is a little bit of change in order to make those files smaller. JPEG is not recommended. It compresses. And with a JPEG file, every time you open it, and if you make a change to it and you save it again, it compresses some more. You level it and save it. It compresses. You crop it, it compresses a little bit more. If you try to use a JPEG file with Stamp Z, you'll get an error message flashing up telling you that it's not going to be saved as a JPEG. It will be saved. Any changes will be saved in a TIFF format. And also scan as straight as possible. This avoids skewing, which skewing causes minor degradation to the image. The pixels are in straight, horizontal, and vertical rows. If it's skewed, you end up with at enough magnification, you can actually see the pixels becoming sawtooth as they try to make that image on there from a distance, so it can still look like a perfectly straight line to us. So the very top of the user panel, it's pretty typical buttons. Open, you need to open, select a stamp, want to save it because you made some changes, or you want to save it to get it into the open recent. The open recent will save the last 10 files that you've looked at in case you're working on something you don't want to have to go back. You get interrupted and you need to come back. Reset just changes it to however it was when it opened. Clear erases everything. Fit maximizes the image on the screen. Exit obviously closes. And the DB examine, if you have data in there, you can go ahead and look at it. Below that, the file, that will tell you the name of the file you're looking at. Below that, the next line, the blue numbers in there is just the position of your cursor on the screen. The green tells you the size of your image, and then a little thumbnail that gives you some background about your image. The next line down, you have four main tools. View, you can move it around, change the fit, do things to it, but it does not really change the image itself. But if you want to position the image yourself, you can. Level is basically skewing, cropping is cropping, and sampling is the real meat and potatoes. The line color will become more important in a moment, but it just ended up in the screen, so I left it there. So you start by opening a slide. This is how it opens. Computers work with screen coordinates, which start with the X and Y axis at 0 at the top left corner. So that's why this stamp is at the top left corner of the screen, and the left side is slightly out because it's actually all the way to the edge of the window. I use Cartesian simply for the graphing application. I'm used to seeing the 0 axis at the bottom left from my years of having to deal with mathematics and trying to make little graphs to depict things to people. But the fit, you hit the fit button. Now it puts it in the middle. You'll notice that the ruler at the bottom now is left side is lined up with 0. The image, even though it's not all the way to the left, it's been fit there, but you'll notice that the ruler on the left side also goes down to the very bottom edge before it starts. So the first thing that you might want to do, especially if you're going to take dimensions or you're going to use the perf gauge, is you want to level it. So if you click on the level, it defaults to the white line. That works well with some stamps. You might want to change it to other colors, and we'll give an example here in a minute. The rotation angle is basically just, tilting it one way or the other. The grid offset is if you click the grid, it'll apply a grid over the stamp. And you can move the grid back and forth to align, and I'll show you that in a minute. Apply leveling. If you like what you have, you hit the apply. If you want to save it, you can save it. It'll give you the option to put a suffix on your title of your file name, or you can just save your file as is. Although if you want to save a crooked image of your file, that's up to you. Here is the grid turned on. You can see by looking at it that the stamp's slightly out of tilt. It's not level, especially top edge. Top left side, you can see that it's a little bit lower than the lines of the grid, which are level and plumb. And one thing you will notice after a while is that a great many of our stamps are not square. I don't know if that was just something that happened in the etching process or the making of the plates or wear and tear over the time or the paper shrinking. There's been a lot of suggestions as to why. But here's, anyway, on the last one there, had you got it to where you liked it and hit the apply button, that would have applied it. The next thing for perforation gauge, the reason that you want it to be nice and square is here you see we have the level. Notice that the grid line is nice right across the top of that printed area. And you click on that and it brings up the stamp. And in this case, I brought another one. But the gauge itself should look to most people like the gauge most of us grew up with. either as a printed on a piece of metal or a clear piece of plastic that you could put on top of the stamp and slide it around. And this you can just put your mouse somewhere on it and drag it around till you get the little dots to line up in the areas of the perforation, and works quite well, and it works off of perforations. There are buttons to the right that you can record automatically the perforation. You can do for both horizontal and vertical. You can save the measurement. It'll write a little text file and put it in the same folder that you took the stamp out of. And then at the bottom, you can actually add your own notes, add your own summary if you want to say where you got the stamp or if there's something unusual about it. The next thing to do is the measurement. And this is again where the being level is straight, because if you select horizontal or vertical measurement, they are exactly horizontal and exactly vertical on there. You can change the size of the line itself up above. The decimal places, you can if you want it more accurate, less accurate, that's up to you. You can add the labels to it, or you can just add them on your own. There is a area for the measurements to be saved and for you to write them in the little white box there. Here you can see an example of a horizontal and a vertical. The measurement itself is in the box. It's to the millimeter. I have it set to 2 decimal places. Pretty accurate. It's very helpful, especially in trying to tell some of the flat plate and rotary plate stamps apart. At the very bottom of the window that the stamp is in, you'll see this little bunch of icons. This shows up in others, and this is a good place to go over them. The left button, the home button, takes you to the opening position. The left arrow goes to a previous view if you have changed from the way it opened. The right goes back to the future. The crosshair arrow, if you click on it, you can reposition the image, get it, and actually drag it around. The magnifying glass is just exactly that. Zoom, you draw a box around it, and that part there magnifies. The sliders, they just come with with Python. You can adjust how far offset to the left side and right side and up and down and that, but I never use it, but it's there. And then the discs, the old floppy disk that you can see there, that saves a screenshot. So if you wanted to take a screenshot of this, so you wouldn't have to write down where the measurement was taken, it'll automatically take a ping and it'll put it wherever you tell it to put it. Now you notice that there's a little circle up at the right corner. It's kind of blurred out, but it has the crosshairs in it. That tells you exactly where your cursor is being placed when you're making your measurements. And you can clearly see when you go over the paper area to the printed area, you can see right where that is. So it allows you to get it fairly accurate, because after all, we are dealing with pixels. So the marker itself is actually a few pixels bigger than what we're trying to measure. So the next thing is we are going to look at moving over to crop. When you go to crop, the crop controls, which is in the middle of the screen, allows you to vertices. Those are basically how many corners does your stamp have. My whole excursion into cropping was because I had friends that collect Cape of Good Hope stamps, and you couldn't really crop a triangle. No matter how hard you try, you ended up with a triangular stamp in a rectangular box. So you can choose 3 corners if you want. If you have a 5-sided stamp, for some reason, maybe a Cinderella or something, and you want to crop it, you can crop it, or a hexagon, all the way up to octagon. It does pretty well. So once you select how many vertices you want, you take your mouse and you click out and you click over to one of the corners, and you place the first marker, and then you go to the next corner and the next corner. And you have to either go clockwise or counterclockwise. If you go on the top from left to right and then go down to the bottom and go right to left, you end up with an hourglass, which is not real helpful. So looking at this, the stamp on the left, I purposely left the right corner down a bit. Just you can click on it once all four of them are placed. You can click on any of the corner points and drag it to fine adjust it. So we have the one on the right where we have actually fine adjusted it. As you can see that it's grayed out, so you can actually see where it's cropped. Now, the next thing, if you like that and you go to save it, it's going to put a CRP on the end of your file name, and not the extension, but the file name. You don't need to use that. You can take it off if you want. I kind of find it helpful because typically I don't like to overwrite the original image. I like to keep it. Now, here's an example where I use the fine square button that was on at the bottom of the crop mode. So the stamp on the left, you notice that it's really out of whack with fine square. That's how much out that particular stamp happens to be from square. And I tried adjusting it and taking some of the bottom off of it and hitting it again. And in spite of that, I still ended up with a stamp that was a little bit of white showing on the bottom left and a little bit of white showing on the bottom right, which tells me that there's a possibility that I did not have it exactly 100% level when I was leveling it. Now, sampling. This is really what most people are interested in, I think, if you have an interest in this sort of thing. This has a number of different things on it here. It looks kind of complicated, but it's not really. The template mode at the top. Once you can build a template that each time you load a stamp, you can load that template and it'll place your sample points in the same spot each time, so you don't have to do it yourself. If you like doing it yourself, you can click on manual. It has a default name of manual mode, but you can change that name to anything you want. And by the way, that's where it will save the data in whatever you name that. You click the auto button, it just auto populates the name of the file in there, although it attaches that to the sample anyway. In this case here, I went back and activated all 6 samples so they'd all show up. If you only had 4 samples, you'd only see 4 possible samples, but you can see the rectangles there. I changed these all to 10 by 10 boxes, and I grabbed them in the middle. So you can go back anytime and change this. Very fluid in that way. So here I've loaded in a template called Shorthand for Marie Dugandon. I've loaded it on a used stamp here. Typically I build the templates on unused mint stamps. And here you can see one of the problems is this is a canceled stamp, and there is one marker is right on top of the cancellation. Once all 6 of them are on there, you can go in and grab with your mouse, and you can drag them around and move them as you see fit. If you don't like the size of the marker, you can go back to the marker number, hit the reset button, and change it to your heart's content. Very fluid. So here, once you get the 6 markers placed, as you start making adjustments to it or just clicking on them, a little box will show up that shows you values. And there's a couple of different values on here. The one I use the most is the top. It looks like a little triangle E, and that's a delta E. Delta E for CIE lab standards is the spatial distance of the color from another color in 3-dimensional space. And the C-Lab is actually worked into human perception and how our color vision is not linear across the board. Now, even though colors are linear, our vision is not. But it has a number of different things in here that you can see how much each one is changing from the average. And so you can dial it in based on the delta E, the overall. You can dial it in on the L value, often called L star, luminosity or lightness, some people call it, the chroma, or the hue. The hue variance is in degrees from the average, the mean. And if you look at a color wheel, 360 degrees, each one of the colors occupies a certain set number of degrees. So that's what that coincides to. But this makes it easy to get all 6 of your samples or 4 of your samples or however many down within a certain threshold. And in my case, I like to work with, try to get them at 1 or less, but 2.3 is considered basically the same color, although there are some issues with that, which we'll go into. But once you get all your patterns set, at the very bottom below the little boxes with the samples on them, you have another row of buttons. The top row has to do with the templates. You can save the template, you can update it, you can delete it, you can clear it. You don't like it, want to start over. The Analyze button will open up a window that will give you the option for RGB or LAB, and also channel mask for histogram study, in case that's how you want to do your color analysis. The View Data opens the internal SQL database, so you can see what numbers are in there. Maybe this is the first one. You want to make sure that it's actually populating, or maybe you have a number of different stamps and you want to see how this one compares. The Review Compare button will take you to another screen that will show you the results, and from there you can go and actually compare 2 colors in your library. Library takes you right into the library, and you can add to the library. If you're so happy with the color right here, you can just add it from here and you don't have to bother with the other steps. If you hit the results and compare button, you get a screen that looks like this. This shows you your 6 samples, and on the left side, you'll notice there's a checkbox to the left of the sample, a very small one, and to the right, there is a little checkbox with a P. Had I been taking paper samples, I might not want to take 6 paper samples, so I might want to take a few color samples as well to get a contrast or compare. So I could take several paper samples and check them so they differentiate. And otherwise, the paper and the lighter color and the darker color, if you average them, is obviously not going to give you an accurate color at all. On the right, the much bigger swatch, that's the actual average of those 6 colors. And one thing with the 6 colors, if you have one that has something in it that's really throwing it off, it'll show up here, and typically you can see it. So if you can see it, it's probably not a valid sample. To the right, tells you what the average color values are. In my case, I had LAB and RGB both checked, so I'm seeing both of them. If I'd only checked one, I would only see the one. Below that, the first button, I can add the color to the library, which it will add that average color into my library. I can name it anything I want. And usually what I do when I'm working with a number of stamps is I'll initially name them as the file name, or green -1, green-2, green-3. If I am working with several different stamps, different denominations, but stamps that are supposed to be the same number, like say in the France Pasteur Definitive Series, I will include the catalog number in front. I can save it to the database. I can save it to file. Again, this will save it to a text file that goes to the same place you open the image in. If you've already saved a file, it will update to that file, so it doesn't just give you a whole bunch of different files you got to dig through. It'll add to it. It'll save the comparison image, and we'll go through that in a minute, and also compute coverage. So if we're going to compare, then what we want to do, which is at the very top button to the right of the results, what this does is it brings us up all the swatches in our library, and you can pick as many libraries or one library in there that are relatively close to this color, and it rates them by delta E again, and it'll show anything that's within delta 15, which I realize it's a long ways away, but when you're first starting out and building a library, sometimes that's real helpful. And again, on the right is the big average of your stamp that you did. So going back to the window before, I mentioned that we had a compute coverage and save comparison. If I was taking some paper samples, then I could do a coverage based on the percentage of inked area to non-inked area, but I need to know what the paper looks like so it knows how much to calculate out. So here's what that looks like. Here, in this example, I've gone back and I've selected moved 4 samples over into unprinted areas. Might be on her forehead, could have been out in the margin around the perforations, could have been in the middle of the letter RF or on her shoulder, bottom right. You can see there is some variation. The stamp does show a little bit of staining, and for those ever astute viewers, you'll notice that this image here actually has another stamp behind it. That was not intentional, but I thought it was rather amusing that happens on a time. So who knows, there might be a golden find back there. I'll have to go look. So at any rate, if you do take paper samples and ink samples, it'll give you two averages. From there, you can do a comparison, and it will give you to either put it side by side or the swatch around, frame it around like you see here. The side by side gives you a much bigger swatch, but I kind of like having it surrounded this way. And if you have a cropped image, this eliminates the perforation and the black, the background. The marker average ink samples on canvas is what the color is. You can do a stripe pattern if you want, and you can make this go vertical and horizontal. And you might ask me, why is that important? I'm going to show you any minute now. And you can print the RGB values on the side in case you want to take a screenshot of it. And the padding is just how thick the frame is going to be on the side. If you go to the other one that was actually calculating the coverage, it tells you what the percentages are. However, here you'll notice that we have the ink marker in the third one down in the paper at the top. The other two ink regions have a lot of gray in them. That's because this is a canceled stamp, so it's including the cancellation in here. One of the things I'm toying with right now is using a cancellation lift to actually turn that into a layer and take it out of the calculation. But we'll have to see how well that works. But I was talking about the stripes left and right, and there's a process called metamerism, and this is where basically the human eye is fooled. We can have two different colors at a distance that look the same to us. We can have two of the same colors up close under slightly different lighting conditions that will look different to us. We can just be tricked. So in this case here, to some people, the stripes will look exactly the same as a solid color in the middle. To other people, it's going to look like they're off. You know, there's a little more gray in them. They're not quite as dark. They are indeed the same color. This is one of the issues with relying on the eyeball method of coming up with what color is it. So what do you do with all these results after you've taken them? If you go back up to the top menu bar and click on color analysis, there's a number of different methodologies that have been put in here. And the beauty of Python code is many people much smarter than me figured this stuff out long before, and it's all open source. And in fact, I use Matplotlib or Lib, which is basically MATLAB's a version of MATLAB open source. And MATLAB I looked at early on, looking for a 3D scatter plot. The cost was a little out of my range, and there was no guarantee that the 3D plots that they offered was going to do what I wanted to do. You know, I thought for me it was important to be able to plot the data and actually see how far apart they were, since it was in 3D space. I've seen some two-dimensional plots and different techniques like that, and for me, they just weren't helpful. So, like some people can learn how to do something by watching a video, other people have to be shown hands-on how it works. Different ways for different people, and we all have different methods. But in the color library, if you go down, you can go into the color library, you can compare, you can close all the windows from here in case that you have a bunch open. You can create a standard libraries if you want to go in, from here, which you could also do from the libraries by just creating a new library. That's a little bit of a duplicative effort right there, repetitive. But underneath that is spectral analysis. If you click on that, it gives you these 4 spectral graphs. They're based on your color, your image. You have to have an image open for this to happen. You have to analyze it. But these are different ways of looking at that particular stamp. You can see by the red green on the top right, and that's from this is from the Marie de Gondon green stamp, which looks like that. And the different graphs are read differently. I'm not going to go into detail on them because, again, we could spend a lot of time. And in truth, I will admit that I don't understand fully every single one of these, exactly what it's trying to tell me, but a lot of people do. So that's why they're in there. Now, the next thing down on that list was to go and look at the data. And if you hit the Plot 3D Data Manager, it'll open a window that looks like this. And it opens all the internal databases that you have. And you'll notice that some have ABG after them and some do not. The ABG indicates that that particular one contains average value. You can also click down and load an existing a file if you want. And you can import external data as a new worksheet. Let's say you've been working on transferring data from one spreadsheet to another. You have it all put together. Or maybe somebody has sent you a CSV. Hey, here's what I'm working on. Take a look. So you can import it and take a look. If you go on the initial internals, any of them will initially open up the little graph that was below. And what's more important are the buttons at the top of it. They're in a straight line. You can refresh from from Stamp Z, meaning you can go back to the color analysis screen. You can move things around. Maybe you take one out. You look at the data number and they're way off from everything else. You can save the file from here. You can save changes that you make in the SQL database, which are limited to changing the color of the markers and the shape of them. Initially, I had hoped that you could do all the external functions internally, but I have not been able to quite figure out how to do that yet. You can clear your cluster data. However, this is permanent. You hit that button, you'll get a warning, and if you don't heed it, everything is gone in this database. And then the next one is you can open it in Plot 3D, which will open a 3D scatter plot. You can refresh the plot in case you've gone in and changed some of the color markers to try to figure out where they are in the plot. You can export to a standalone plot in case you don't have an external database already, and you can import data all from this one spot. If you open the Plot 3D from any of the bottom 3 options, you're going to see initially a plot that looks like this, a 3D plot. Those are your data points spread across there from your database. And again, this looks perhaps rather intimidating, but once you get the hang of it, this is pretty simple too. It's basically a simple graph with a whole bunch of tools to allow you to turn it, spin it, make it bigger, make it smaller. But I find it quite helpful. And this way you can actually, by being able to rotate it, you can actually see, you can probably see a couple of the data points there that look like they're kind of close together. It may just be that from the angle that it's being looked at. And if you rotate it around, you may find out that they're actually quite a ways apart. So On your next one here, I wanted to export. This is an example of export. So I export my data that we were just looking at, and I call it whatever I want to call it. It'll initially give you a very long name. You can use that very long name if you want, but it's just its way of identifying it. It includes a timestamp and a couple of other what I consider to be unnecessary details, but my efforts to try to clarify that just created more problems. So I finally gave up and left it alone. And you hit the save button and it'll open. And now you're back into this, what we showed you earlier. It's a spreadsheet. You'll notice that nothing is written in that pink area up at the top. Here I can go down and very quickly change a marker. There's a drop down. If you click on it, there'll be a drop down that tells you what's allowed. And you do the same with the color. If I want to change a group of them, I can then copy the marker and the color together, or do it separately and do a typical spreadsheet, drag and cover a number of cells and then paste. If I want to sort, I can sort from here. If I want to change the data ID, which adds all the average points it identifies as PT999. Usually one of the first things I do is I go through and I eliminate that because it's really not offering me any great deal of additional information. On the far right, it automatically calculates out what your light, chroma, and hue values are. So the data is normalized because it makes that range very small. If we use full-size ranges in the L star, A star, B star, the L range is 0 to 100. The A and the B are minus 128 to plus 127. In a three-dimensional plot, this would give us 8 grids or 8 quadrants. And if you're, a Deep Space Nine, a Star Trek fan, that might be exciting, but it becomes a little difficult, especially when you have some data that traverses into 2 different quadrants. It makes it really hard to deal with. And even RGB is 0 to 255. So these create very large plotting areas. Now,
Hey, Stan, we're about 5 after, just in case.
Okay, yeah, we're getting close here. We're pretty close. At least I hope we're getting pretty close. So if you want to do a 2D, two-dimensional, there's a couple different ways to do it. There's a three-dimensional, which gives you the depth here, which basically ends up with one of the axes being kind of squashed, and the one on the left, the B axis, is not really much use because you can't read any of the numbers. If you go to a two-dimensional, this makes it easier, and I apologize, I cut off when I made the slide one of the axes. There is a interactive browser that you can click on it. It will open it in your browser, and this particular window here may not look like much, but you can grab it and spin it around however you wish, much more easily than you can the Plot 3D graph. And if you click on any of those little points, it'll tell you automatically what they are, which you can do in the Plot 3D, but it takes a little more work. It's kind of a slick way of just another way of looking at it and actually seeing how they're looking. I would be able to turn this to where I could literally look down that line to where they were almost in a straight line. If I wanted to do the polar plot, which is like a color wheel, I could click on that and it gives me this kind of view. This is two-dimensional. The lightness comes out as the coloring of the dots in the middle. But in this case, this was from the Pasteur, green Pasteur stamps, one of the ones that was used with the stripes going both ways. And they're all in the green area, and you can see how big of a swath here they cover on that. Some people like that, and sometimes it's healthy. And I'm actually working on making this a 3D cylinder. See if that helps visualizing things a little bit better. The zoom, you have like multiple different ways to do zoom. Once you find a zoom that you like, you can set it, you can call it something and recall it later on. You can do the zoom based on one of the axes if you wish. Once we get below all of those main tools, we have a number of collapsible menus and less common tools, but they're all useful. The point identification gives you a couple of different ways to identify points. You can do it in 2-dimension. The one drawback with 2-dimension here is if you have two points that are too close together, or one is partially behind the other, you're going to have a hard time determining which one is which. So that's where the 3D comes in a little bit better. But if it's fairly spread out, then you just want to do fairly quickly, the 2D is faster. The k-means is a mathematical formula that determines clusters by looking at the data. And so if you give it a range of data, in this case, I have rows 8 through 72, and I say there's going to be 4. I think there's, because the catalogs say there's 4 different colors. So I'm looking for 4 different clusters here. I can calculate that. Once you run it, you can save it to your spreadsheet. It has to be an external spreadsheet, but once you run it and save it, you have to reload your spreadsheet to get the spreadsheet to update. But then in the spreadsheet, the k-means does an indexing starting with 0. So the first sphere is 0, the second sphere is 1, and the third sphere is 2 and 3. That's something I have no control over. The numbers to the right, the centroids, those are basically the radiuses of the center of the sphere that we're going to plot around that. And we can set the color if we want. So moving on, so looking at the spheres, this is what you get when you plot the k-mean clusters. So each one of these is how the clusters are coming together, what's more common. The fact that some of the clusters don't have many little dots in them, it could just be simply because you didn't have very many samples that were that color. But it tends to work fairly well. The one problem with the sphere is it assumes that it's very symmetrical, and most of the data is not symmetrical, which we can show by doing a linear trend, which is here. These are the same exact spots without the spheres on them, and you can see that they're fairly close. They trend pretty well to a straight line. So symmetry, they're not evenly in all directions. One of the problems with the LAB and the 2.3 delta E difference is that works great, except if you have 2 points that happen to be exactly 180 degrees from the center radius that they're common to, they are now 4.6 delta E apart and no longer the same color. And this is something that's kind of bugged or been a conundrum for quite a while. I've heard some methodologies to just make the circle smaller or make the range smaller, or to calculate all the means between everything that falls in that circle, and you can see which ones are closest and which ones are farthest. And this is using the pairwise delta E function. It's just a matrix box. Kind of if you were playing a Super Bowl ladder.
I'm going to start bringing people over because it's about 10 after.
Okay.
Okay. And, by all means, continue. But I think there's a lot of questions people have too.
All right. Well, we only have 8 slides left. The sphere display just allows you to turn them on and off. If you want to see them, great. Or you only want to see one, you click it on, you click the other ones off, and away you go. Ellipsoid. This uses Gaussian theory. You can plot it to looking at the whole stamp, all the plots under one single eclipse, or you can look at it as all the individual ones. And what it does, it has two basic spheres. There's a central sphere, which is more of a round sphere, and then it has a very elongated one, which kind of traverses the way the points are actually going. The larger one encompasses 65 of the sample points. So it looks something like this. Although it looks a little more difficult to read, it does kind of give a better idea of how the colors, the different colors are trending. If you look at the per tone cluster, the two at the left are the darker colors, and they're kind of going in the same direction. So the pigments in those were very similar. The one in the middle, in this case, is probably what was referred to as just the basic green color, although not necessarily, because this is a relatively small data group for this study. But they tend to move in a different spot. And then, of course, we have the lightest colors all the way to the far right, and they kind of dance to the beat of their own drum. When we get into this, we can look at ternary plot, and some people like this, and actually Jack Tenford is who I actually put this in here for, and hoping that he uses it, because the more people that use it, the easier it is to share data if we're all using the same platform. It brings up a user interface like this that you can load your data in. You can use real time, or you can use external. Once you load a plot in, this is what a ternary plot looks like, and kind of clusters everything around. For me, these are not all that helpful, but I tend to run through all of them when I'm looking at stuff just to see if I notice anything that stands out and tells me something. And if I like it, I can save the plot as a ping over here, and I get just a picture just like that. The next one, it takes me to the library. I can look at all my libraries. This happens to be a Stanley Gibbons color key, one of the earlier ones that I got that I scanned in, giving it the name that I wanted to. I can combine it with other ones if I want, or leave them separate as I go through. And as you can see here, I have quite a few libraries building up there. It'll show up to 50 colors at a time. I can search. I can list them as by alphabet, by hue, if I want, and I can actually filter by a color. If I want to look at only reds, I can scroll down and just get only reds. In the settings tab in the library section, this is where you can export or import. I can merge libraries in here. That's non-destructive. It leaves the first two as they were and sends them back. And gives you one that's common of both, and it eliminates your duplicates, but leaves the original ones alone. I recommend that once you start building up a library, that you export any of your libraries and save them just in case something happens. There are other options. Chromamate by Clive Levison, also the maker of Image Sleuth. Maybe more to your liking. I don't think it has quite as much analysis in it. PMGS Stamp Fix, Jed Dorman has a color analyzer in it now, and Stamp Fix does a wonderful job when you're dealing with multiple images. So I would highly recommend that, as well as Chromamate and Image Sleuth. These are all useful applications. And Perfomaster 4000 is still around. I believe you can still download it. It requires Java 12 to run. So I think it runs on older Linux machines. I was running it on my legacy Mac before I changed over to ARM. And I do have Java 12 on my new silicon chip Mac, and it does work, but it's a little jerky. And there were reasons. The whole reasons that the Stamp Z came around is it was announced by Herman Bucks, who we owe some gratitude for coming up with the app in the first place. He said he was discontinuing all support for it and no further development. So that kind of left me thinking, what was I going to do with all these things I had sampled? And having said that, I am now done. Thanks, folks. That's where you can download the app. There is my email. If you have any issues, I will do one-on-one or multiple Zoom meetings with anybody who would like to walk through it. And I love talking color, because I'll be the first to admit I don't know all there is to know about it, and there's a good chance that some of what I know is wrong. So there you have it. Questions?
Thanks a lot, Stan. That was interesting and very complex. You know what? We had a question earlier on that I had myself was, is there a user manual available? And I know you've told me that there isn't one.
Yeah, I
But The saving grace here is this presentation is going to be on YouTube, uh, in the next few days after we get it downloaded.
Yeah.
And I would say you could use that as a user guide, to get set up.
Yeah, I had started at one time to write a use. Actually, I started several different times, and then I would make changes, and I would have to go back and re-edit it. And then I finally just decided to wait till I was done. I would like to say that I think I'm getting close to the end because I've just about run out of, or I've stopped discovering different ways to analyze color, or ways that think I can apply that might have some application to stamps. I never really ever intended to get this deep into software development ever. It was never my intention. I was just initially frustrated because I couldn't make sense out of some of the color descriptions. Like green yellow. It's like, well, is that 50% green and 50% yellow, or is it more green and a little bit of yellow, or what is it?
Yeah, yeah,
And then another book would say yellow green. I'm like, okay, which way is this going? And then looking at stamps in different countries that would have the same name and realize that they may have the same name, but they're not the same color.
and naming's always been an issue.
Yes.
Okay, you know what? Before we get to the people that are online, let me go through the list here of questions that have been submitted.
Okay.
Frederick Lawrence asks, if you had a stamp that had an overprint on it, can you analyze just the overprint?
Um, as far as the color, yes, you could. However, because of some of the stamp underneath is more than likely going to transmit through there. It's going to uh, affect perhaps the results. I actually have an algorithm right now that is used by the graphic arts people where they lift images into layers. And I'm looking to see if that can be applied to stamps to where you lift the cancellation or the overprint off, lift the ink off the paper, and the idea here is that lifting the ink off the paper is to analyze all the ink on the stamp without the paper even coming into it to see what color we get. Because
that would be useful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can't analyze the whole stamp as it is now because you just get a blend between the printed and the unprinted. And if you have a cancellation on there, then that adds to it. Or if you had an overprint, that would skew the color as well. So perhaps the layers will maybe an answer to that. I'm just not sure how difficult it is to implement.
All right. Bob Zom asks if the app works with photos as opposed to scans.
I don't see any reason why it would. I mean, you're obviously not going to be measuring the perforation of your photo, but yeah, no, it would work on any color. I mean, it's not specific to stamps. The actual color analysis is strictly the color on the image. It doesn't really matter what the image is of. So yes, it would.
All right. Jeff Schubert asks if he can scan in swatches from a color guide, for example, Michelle or Stanley Gibbons, to define a color or calibrate his scanner.
What you would have to do is you would need probably an access to a color spectrometer. So to get an accurate reading of what the sample is, because what I found with like this, I have scanned 5 Stanley Gibbons now, color keys. Most of the colors with the same name do not agree. They're not the same from one printing to the next. Some of it I think is the media they're printed on, the paper, type of paper. Some of it could be just age. I've experienced the same thing with Michelle. Variations in the ink. There's a book on the French occupation or the stamps of Memel, where the author, whose name escapes me at the moment, he has passed away, included the ink colors, the RGB ink colors, supposedly from Michelle, However, it was discovered that they were incorrect and he had passed away, so there was no option to correct them. That's one of the issues with the expensive targets that you buy. They know exactly what colors those are, you know, because in addition to printing them, they've also double checked them, and then that has been fed into the algorithm. But yes, you could use your color key for scanning, but you would probably not be able to rely just on the name of the color. You'd need
Mhm.
the color spectrum. I've actually got one coming from Vietnam right now, which I'm excited to get a little handheld. And I hope I just didn't pay a bunch of money for a piece of junk, but that's what I plan on using it is on my own target, so I can expand the number of colors and then actually measure what the color printed as opposed to what I was hoping he was going to print.
Okay. Gordon Smith asks a tech question here. Does the command level square the stamp to the screen?
Not automatically. If you do if you crop a four-sided square and you do the fine square, it will make that a perfect square 90 degrees in all four corners. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is level or plumb with the screen. The grid is the design there is the hopes of being able to align it with the screen. So oftentimes after I've done it, I will crop the image and then actually drag it all the way to the very uh, bottom left corner and see how well it fits in there. See if everything is up nice and snug. And but it's no, it will not automatically level it for you.
Okay. How much do the results degrade with a smaller color space? For example, 8-bit versus 16-bit versus 24-bit, etc.
Um, there's just a much smaller color pool. Like I said, there's 256 colors in 8-bit, or the number of possibilities that are going to be in the data, the metadata in the scan itself, versus 4,000. I think it's 4,026, but it's over 4,000, just over 4,000 colors. So it's quite a bit of difference. How important is that? Um, I don't know. We could be splitting hairs, but at this point, because this is all a relatively new methodology, I'm trying to have as much accuracy as I can. But if you only have an 8-bit scanner, that's what you got. I mean, that's better than nothing. And
Okay.
I would also suggest not trying to take pictures with your cell phone, just because of trying to get it perfectly flat and square and level to the image itself. And cell phones have a lot of correction as their idea of what makes a good photograph.
Okay. I'm going to leave the written questions at this point, and we'll go into our audience now. Raphael, you've been on for a while.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Stan. Really good. I think I used the app a while ago and I apologize. I have two questions. I'm going to apologize in case I was driving before. I may have missed some of the stuff you said. But regarding when we do the sampling,
Yes.
there's a way that, I mean, that you can discriminate and take only adjacent uh, basically colors, so the sampling is not over the place, and you
Well,
take way out on the sigma on your distribution colors that we don't want it, like little pieces of white and stuff like that that we
mhm.
can.
Yeah. There's no way to filter that out at the moment. I mean, if you go to a small enough size, and you can zoom in and scroll in and get a much bigger view of the area that you're sampling to try to avoid those areas that did not get ink, or where the paper is porous and you've got light bleed coming through from the reflection coming through on it.
Right.
But you can stack them up right next to each other. I initially thought one of the reasons for the templates is I initially thought that would be important to take all of my samples from the exact same spot in each stamp. The reality is that the printing process is not consistent. The application of the ink is not consistent. and the mixing of the pigments to make the color that it's printed in is not consistent. So it really doesn't, there's no real advantage to taking them all in the same spot. I think there's probably more of an advantage of trying to find a set number that are within a certain range so that you know that they are like colors,
But when you take the average, the greater the area, you know, you're gonna get the average, which kind of gives you in the way, but some of these are outliers,
Yes,
and that may throw the average out. I mean, we
mhm,
do in hardware. I design hardware, and we call sparkles,
mhm,
and we try to filter those out. Like you do, you take more samples, but some of them we put a range. So once you start getting kind of an average, you start discriminating anything below that area.
mhm. Yeah,
So,
and
I mean, if is it open source what you have right now, or just right
yes, it's
now?
all, yes, it's open source, and
Okay, that'd be great. So anybody
and
that
you
can come out,
you
if I can
you are
come with a
welcome
Python,
to.
I do a
Oh
little
yeah,
Python for the sampling and update the sampling
yeah,
and
yeah. And if there's a better way, there are a couple things in there where I can set thresholds internally as far as limits as to how much it will allow for deviations and things like that. But the larger the sample area, there's one thought that kind of smooths things out and takes up for any inequalities or variations in what you're looking at. On the other hand, it doesn't really tell you what they are. And I haven't got down to the point of getting an individual analysis of each sample area, although that would be easy to add.
no, what you have is great. And the second question, I'll be very quick, I promise, is for calibrating, can we use like the camera calibrators RGB that you can buy
Oh,
in Amazon and they tend to
oh,
be
the I like
relatively
oh like
and
the
put
I
it on the scanner and scan that and everybody use this brand and everybody buys those and we can use the program and have more or less a uniform platform.
well, the advantage of doing that is that actually uh, calibrates the scanner itself, and so it affects the results the scanner puts out. So the IT, whether it's the Fujifilm or the Kodak, the
Yep.
problem is most of them are rather pricey. I'm not sure if everybody wants to spend 50 to $100 to buy a
I
target.
know, but there's some of them that are less quality and they like in the range
Yes,
of 20 to 30. If
yes,
you will put that on the website and like that, everybody will be more consistent because that's the whole
hmm
community. I mean, I love it. It's just I used an old version and it was great. So this has
hmm
to be much better. So
yeah. I use a Kodak version initially, and then because it's proprietary, I don't actually know what all the values are on it, so I can't just load that and dump it into Stamp Z, which is why I made my own target. Was the whole reason for that.
great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the effort you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raphael.
No,
David
Rob,
Darrow.
ever has had his hand up. He's in the audience. I'm not sure if he has a question. You might not see him. Ever, do you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, I'm in the UK, and we find that a lot of people are asking for colours. I've already tried running the colour check on the penny red, and on the VSC, there was about 12 different colours there. I got two traces, which each trace had about 5 lines over printing on each other. And that told me one thing, that you can't trust the color guides because it's the same ink color, just blended to make it look right. So if you're going to be analyzing a color and you're trying to say to somebody else, I've got this color, then it's got to be an international accepted color. Now, where is that reference going to come from?
Oh, that's a
I
million
mean,
dollar
in
question.
the UK, with the Royal, we do use the Queen King's Collection, which was King George V for the main colours, because that we know were the original stamps which have been kept in the correct condition, and
Mhm.
Therefore, they haven't been subject to light and the humidity is right. So it's about the best copy you're going to get at the
Mhm.
moment. Um, I mean, you get some come in where the papers are toned, which have obviously darkened the stamps and things like that. So you've actually either got to do an analysis of the actual inks rather than what it actually looks like. So that's my first point. So
Mhm.
I accept what you've done. I mean, I enjoyed the seminar, and it says that if you make your own database with samples, you can say it's the same as that one, but it's not actually being a universal where you could send that figure to somebody else somewhere at the other side of the world and get the same result. It's still coming down to a person's opinion of what the color is originally. Um, so that is really, you know, I say it's useful tool for comparison, but it's not actually being able to say what the color is. That if it went to an auction house, you couldn't guarantee it to be the color you're saying it is. It's what you think the color is, and another person will make it something different. Also, with scanning, uh, with the deterioration of the lamps, therefore the light quality of that will give you a different reading between two different scanners.
This is
So, so
yeah.
you can only do your comparison on the same machine all the time.
Well, that's one of the ideas between having a calibration that works with the analysis and normalizes to those colors. Um, does it work? Absolutely. I don't know yet. It's relatively new. The few things that have been tested seem to be okay. Other ones, there have been a couple of other things that I'm not real sure. But then one of the issues is that I'm not sure all of us are sampling the exact same spot on the stamp, and there's a lot of variation on there. With respect to the names, I don't know how you're going to get around that. I don't know how many hundreds of years now that we've been naming color names in different countries, and to this date, nobody seems to have any that agree.
Well,
It,
I mean, I will actually, clarify my point and just say that taking the GB stamps, if you take the Prussian blue of the 1935 is a different Prussian blue to the 1924 Tupney Halfpenny. So again, there's philatelists make their own mind up as to what a colour actually is.
well, yeah, I mean, true, and you could probably apply that and compare it to the France type sage Prussian blue, and I'm going to guess it's probably not the same color either. They're
Yeah.
all going to be different shades. So the semantics is a big stumbling block, and I honestly don't know how we get around that. Whether we end up just calling it red plus one, red minus one, which is kind of boring and not very enlightening, and could get overly complicated. But what I was after was some objective way to measure something and with a calibrated set be able to send that image to another person and have them analyze it. Or for that matter, if we had calibrated scanners, I should be able to send them that stamp if I wanted to and have them scan it on their scanner and come up with something similar. Um, I don't, like I said, this is all rather new to me. This Stamp Z is less than a year in development and testing, and so I don't know where it's going to go, and I could just be all just full of baloney for all I know. But
So please
Dan,
don't think
it
I
is
was
keeping me occupied.
criticising. I was just making it as comments that I have found.
Yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoyed your
Oh,
displays,
well,
your seminar tonight.
thank you.
thank you. Martin Seifering just made a really good comment. He says, analyzing becomes mathematic. He says,
Hmm.
at some point, the name is not the point.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
yeah. If we're just working with numbers, I mean, if we both come up with the same set of numbers for a certain item, we can probably agree relatively well that it is that value, unless there's something wrong with the equipment that we're comparing it or using it on. I mean, you have to realize we are using consumer grade scanners, which are not designed for what I'm trying to use them for. Although there's a lot of industry use on using consumer grade scanners for other types of color analysis. I mean, I have roughly about 100 peer-reviewed printed papers now on a multitude of different applications. Do any of them apply to stamps? Not a single one. Grapes, tomatoes,
Well, I'll just
paint,
make one last
furniture.
comment. If you go back to records and see what the printers are asked to produce, it's generally 20,000 sheets of red stamps. They don't actually state the color until after about 1950 when they did. But the early reference is that. But we get Stanley Gibbons charts which give us 16 colors of red, and things like that. So it's really only philatelists that have made the colors up for themselves.
Yeah. Well, I've often wondered if the entities behind the printing of stamps ever really meant for there to be so many different color variations.
Yeah.
I think in their mind, if they said we want red stamps, damn it, they all better be red, and we want green ones and they all better be the same color green. But we all know that's not how it worked out.
But
Okay.
if you
Thank
look
you.
good, if you look at ink technology, the ink technology has changed a great deal as well. And there were many people making Prussian blue ink, selling it as Prussian blue ink, and there was no international standard to make sure that all those Prussian blues were exactly the same.
Yeah, then you need spectroscopy to sort it out.
Yes, and that's exactly. I think if you get past to comparing to anybody's standards and just get to a calibrated spectrometer, then you can truly measure the color, and everybody knows exactly what they're dealing with. And forget the names, forget the color guides, just get to a data set. And this is all coming. These technologies are getting cheaper and cheaper all the time.
All right, David Darrow, you've been waiting for a while.
A little bit. Again, thank you for taking this on. I had a similar idea when I started working with trying to figure out shades. I'll use my scanner. I'm scanning the stamps anyways. I've got Photoshop. I can select the pixels and see what the numbers are. And I did a couple of stamps and very quickly realized I'd need a statistical analysis tool to sort through that, to do the cluster analysis and things like that you did. And I said, oh, the heck with that. I'm going to collect stamps instead. But one of the things I did discover in doing this is my scanner will scan a known size, different sizes, scan after scan. It stretches the X and the Y axis different amounts, and the amounts vary from scan to scan. Very troubling.
Yeah, they all seem to vary. The tolerance that they were designed for. I mean, the majority of the consumer grade scanners were designed for documents.
Yeah.
And then there are the color photos, and some of them do a real good job. I have the Epson V600. This is the second one I have.
That's the actual one I have.
Great. It works great. I'm unfortunate they don't make them anymore. I'm actually now looking at a mirrorless shutterless camera setup to go with a macro lens to move over to that, since that's what a lot of photographers that reproduce film for archival work use. So I think that's the direction I'm going there. There are limitations. The big frustration is the ability to easily share results with people. So many of us are just kind of working in a vacuum. You can look at somebody's results and go, oh, that's nice. Oh, yeah, that looks good. I think I see the difference between those. But, if it was under their lighting conditions and using their scanner and their computer, they might come up with a completely different set of, results or ideas on this. So, that was one idea. And I realized that going in, because that was one of the main arguments is that, you can't different people with different scanners and even monitors. And I've tried to throw the monitors out because the monitor is just a display. That's just how it displays what the scanner captured, but it's not actually changing the data itself. It's just based on the profile of the monitor, how it's coming out. So anymore, how it looks on the scanner is to me is not very important. You know, I've long since given up trying to make my stamp look exactly on my monitor like it looks in my hand or like it looks on the thing. I think that's baloney. I think the approach with the objective approach of getting value, number data, and especially the bigger the pool, the easier it is to see how the colors separate, and they're definitely separate. It's not like there's just one big long blob where everything runs together. I mean, in most cases, there's always a few of the outliers that lay in the middle and don't especially fit into anything. And maybe they were just weird ink stamps. Maybe they were changelings. Maybe they sat on somebody's windowsill. I don't know what happened to them to account for these, but with the outliers, most of those I just throw those out. I mean, I exclude them from the data if they're too far out by themselves. I should say I don't throw them out. I exclude them and put them aside in the event that I happen to find more like them, so I get a bigger data pool. But I like to work with a minimum of 30 to 40 stamps, and 50 to 60 or 70 is even better. And although some people might think I'm crazy when they say you sit here all day long and you scan that many stamps, are you nuts? But it's what I like to do. It's a hobby. This is just where the hobby has taken me. But
All
yeah,
right.
it'd be nice if we could standardize. But I don't know if the industry, just because the manufacturing industry is probably not going to want to give up with their standards anymore, because I understand the people, well, the wine people, they have their own kind of color standards that they judge their grapes on. I work a lot with the Gallo, and Constellation both. They were big accounts when I was working professionally. Some of it's very guarded secret, but they're very, very specific about a Pinot Noir of in the 90th percentile is going to be this color, and there's just no getting around it. And they have a standard, and that's what it's going to be. And if it's not, they have light optics on their sorters that come out, and they kicks it out, and that goes into a lower grade wine.
Stan, the entertainment industry is really driving hard at standards, and the most recent iPhones and iPads have really, really good color rendition for sRGB data, and I've done some experimentation with them, and they are really good at presenting color. And so I think that the pressure on industry, the technology industry, is coming from the entertainment side, and the money is so big that they want to be able to repeat color quite precisely.
Yeah, I wish there was a easy way to use my iPhone to take a repeatable, pictures of stamps on there. I've seen some setups that I've tried myself with some rather jury rig efforts to secure the phone at a set distance above and take it. But the format that it comes out of the phone also creates a little bit of a difference, because I forget what it's called, but it's not your standard image format, and you're still getting all the metadata.
And you have to be dead parallel too.
Yeah, but I mean, in time, this little handheld color spectrometer that's coming from Vietnam, it's under $100. It's supposed to be good to 0.1 LAB. The 0.1 is pretty tight for something that I'm holding in my hand. It comes with it. So I'm really anxious to receive that and see how it compares, because that way that gives me another tool, especially for calibrating.
Okay, Darren Chernichen, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thanks a lot, Stan, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I am from Chilliwack, BC, on the West Coast as well. And for those who don't know my role in digital philately, I'm the chair of the Digital Philately Study Group for BNAPS, British North American Philatelic Society. Now, one of the things that I involve a lot of my talks with, um, what's really cool about your talk, Stan, is that you went right down to the trees, and in terms of the trees versus the forest analogy. And I think what I'm going to do, and I'm going to actually use the PDF or the YouTube video. I'm actually going to create for you and you can hold me to this. I'm going to create a user manual based on your
Oh,
talk.
wow.
I can use Notebook LM to do this, and Google Notebook LM. So I'm going to be able to take that PDF or that YouTube video and create a summary in terms like a user manual of what you said. Um, and I think that will be useful for those who really need those details. Um, the thing is, I'm looking in my room right now in our family room, and there's one color of paint on the wall. Yet I can look at it and I can see about 18 different shades. So I think there has to be a difference between color and shade, and shade is a spectrum of color, and you can go from one area to the other. So if you call it ultramarine, or if you call it deep blue or sea green or whatever you want to call it, as we were alluding to earlier, I think the important thing about color and shade is that we all want to communicate, and we all want to be basically talking the same lingo, talking the same language. And so if you want to share, notes about a particular shade that you have of a stamp, and there's someone in Sacramento like you who has the same stamp and wants to see if we have apples to apples or apples to oranges, and I think, yes, talking about the actual number, the RGB number or the Y, like those different ones. I've actually created my own apps too. What I really why I'm put up my hand is because I think there has to be an interest group. I'm quite prepared to create a subcommittee with our study group at BNAPS, and I'd like to invite perhaps a few people that have attended this meeting tonight as either guests or active members of this study group to really find consensus amongst uh, uh, collectors, so that we can actually help the beginners to the more experts and everyone in between, so that we can actually have a more uniform collaborative dialogue. And I think that what you have done is a tremendous, using AI and using Python is such an incredibly important um, uh, uh, tool. And you're not even coding. You're just asking this to do stuff for you, and it's doing it for you, and you're modifying it, and you're making something really cool. I think what we need to do is then now dial it down to the common user. And I'm prepared to assist in that regard. I think that's one of my talents, actually, is to dummy things down, and I think I can help dummy things down for those who want it dummied down. So there you go. That's all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, you're my
Well,
hero.
well,
Yeah,
Darren, I did put the link to the digital philately study group in the chat, and I'll include it on the outreach, the follow-up email that goes out, because I think that is a very good place. I'm not sure if any other group has a digital philately study group.
No,
I'm not sure.
and what's interesting about our study group is that you don't have to be a BNAPS member to be a part of this particular study group. All the other study groups in our society, you have to be a member. But because this is there is no genre to digital philately. Basically, what we're trying to do is is it's almost for those who know Harold Krish with the collaborative crew, the it's kind of like that in the sense that it's open to everybody, from beginners to experts, and so you've inspired me, Stanley, and I'll reach out to you and let you know what I've
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the on the Python, on the AI, I didn't start out using AI. I actually started out, built the first code all by myself.
Wow.
I bought Python for Dummies, and it wasn't until I managed to basically get thrown off of a users group, which was advertised that they welcomed beginners, that I stumbled upon Claude. And initially, I was just having a problem with one thing, and so I directed it to my code, and it said, "Oh, here's the error right here," and it was a little teeny thing that I just didn't see, wasn't recognizing it. And then from that point on, initially I was just using it for troubleshooting every time I get an error and I couldn't find it. Where now, to the point, as you say, I just go in there and go, I understand there's a module that does this. Can this be integrated into here, and how would it work? And this is what I want to do, and is that possible? And it's amazing. It'll say, that's a great idea, or like, no, that's not practical at all. That's never going to work for what you're trying to do. And, or it's way too complex, and it's going to create too many other problems trying to interface it. But I found it to be an amazing tool. Amazing. I would not have gotten this far at this point. I would have had my 3D plot and maybe my cropping tool, but that's probably about as far as I would have gotten.
I think the first task for color in digital philately would be, how do we communicate color, and just and coming to sort of a universal consensus about how we communicate color. And if we can actually establish a consensus, then we can actually then take the technology to establish that that consensus.
Darren, I'm noticing that in the chat column here, some people are piling onto your request. So if you want to check this out later.
Can you do me a favor? If you could just save the chat for this whole session.
Oh, it will be.
Yeah, and just email it to me, or if I can access it later, that'd be great. Thanks.
You got it. Okay, let's move on to Ian Bridle. You've been on for a bit.
Yeah, I've just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Just the previous question, going back to that about the difference between shade and color. That was sort of where I was going to ask a fairly basic question, I guess. I've got some old, quite locally printed, relief printed stamps from obviously a metal plate, and it looks like on some of the stamps I have, the plate was under inked, so you end up with, say, a light green. And then on other stamps, it was over inked, so you end up with a dark green, and that's just basically a function of the ink density that's being transferred from the plate to the paper. If you were to run your program on those stamps, which to me, to the human eye, because of the ink density that's being transferred to the paper, they look different colors, light green, green, and dark green. Would your program say, no, this is all the same color? It's just the density of the amount of ink that's on the paper. Would it say it's the same color or not?
Well, because it's reflective, that's one thing. So in areas where it's a little bit thinner, maybe more transparent, you're going to get more of the reflection from basically the paper underneath. Like a lot of things, if you print a color on a dark piece of paper and you use the same color ink in your printer and print it on a light piece of paper, that can look quite different. Some of that is from the metamerism that I showed earlier, just the amount of light coming in around it. But some of it is actually the influence of the underneath it. I've known a couple people that are really quite excellent at oil painting and watercoloring, and they use underpaintings all the time to change, how it appears. Where to me, it's like if you're painting with oil, if you put a color underneath it and you put another color on top of it, and it's really good oil paint, then you shouldn't even see the color niece, but that's not quite how it works.
Yeah, this is the issue I have with people trying to say this is a certain color and that's a different color. Is it can just depend, I believe, on something as much as the ink density that's been transferred from the plate to the paper. So I struggle with the idea of being able to look at micro differences in color
Yeah.
just because
Now
something like ink density.
you would be able to analyze the areas in between the ink, the paper, and then analyze the inked areas, and then you could take that and compare it to another stamp that had a different paper underneath it and see how it affects, especially if it was supposedly the same color. Um,
So this is I'm not talking about a difference in stamp paper. I'm saying the stamps were printed on the same paper, but some of the sheets are overprinted and some of the sheets are over inked and some
oh
of
yeah.
them end up with an under inking. So the ink roller applies ink to the printing
Mhm.
plate. Sometimes the ink roller is over inked, sometimes it's under inked. It's the same ink. Will your program say yes, this is the same color, or will it say no, it's not? It's a
Uh,
different color.
I think it's going to be a lot like painting a wall. If you put the paint on thinly and have a lot of what we call peekaboos over here, as opposed to getting a really heavy coat, it's going to appear to look different, even though we know it's the same paint. We had my wife and I actually got this pumpkin color paint for whatever reason. Had two small walls. Decided that we were going to paint them with it. Same can of paint at different times of the day, depending on how the light hit it. You'd swear they were two completely different colors. I mean, and we'd have people come over and ask them, those look the same to you, and without question they go, no, why should they? They're not the
Yeah.
same color. Like, yeah, they are the same color.
Yeah,
Come
but
back
would your
in
would
the
your
morning and it'll reverse itself. So the Stamp Z
if I
will not
scanned
will not take into consideration how thick the ink is.
yeah, if I scanned the lighter shade and the medium shade and the darker shade, would the analysis that your program does say, hey, they're the same color? Would
It
it
would
would
it would if they're the same values, then you would get the same values. If they reflected the light differently, just because of how they were put on. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I don't think it's going to make up for thin and thick ink.
okay.
And it's strictly a reading how the scanner the light reflected off your stamp when the image was made. It's really more of a function of that. Which is
Hmm.
what, as the one gentleman said earlier, as the scanner ages, the bulb changes and the color shifts. So, there is some criteria there to not be using a really old machine and expecting sterling results.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian. All right, Mark Boyce, you have your hand up.
Yes, I thank you, Stan. That was very enlightening and gave me a lot to think about. But what I worry about is how the expertising committees are making decisions. And and what would be your advice to the Royal Philatelic Society expertising committee on identifying different shades and colors of British stamps that are, make it, as Rob pointed out, it makes a
Yeah,
difference of thousands of
yeah.
dollars
I
as to
I
which color it is.
I think I think the simple question is that a lot of these entities need to come to the 21st century. And I mean, we have the technology, it needs to be applied. And they have the references. They can go back to the vaults and pull out these stamps that they can actually analyze, where people like you and me, we're dealing with whatever stamps we happen to come across in our hobby. But, it does, I don't think, well, I've always kind of questioned what qualifies the examiner who decides what color a stamp is. I mean, because basically he's basically using eyes. He may have something that he's comparing to, but still, it's all his opinion on what it looks like to him. Everything, and we've been doing it that way for a long time. Where we refer to them, but clearly, Now, with the access of digital tools and highly sophisticated optics, it seems like it's time to take another swing at this to get something that's a bit more accurate. Because I've seen some expertise stamps that to me don't look at all like what they're supposed to be. And of course, I realize there are false. Just because someone has a cert on a stamp doesn't mean that it's legitimate, unfortunately. But I have seen ones that have come from well-known entities that by looking at it's like, well, I don't know. That looks a little shaky to me, but okay, who am I to say? I didn't get paid the big bucks to make that decision. So I think it, and I would think that the powers that be, they're probably in a better way as far as budget to afford the necessary type equipment. And the color spectrometers, I don't think it requires spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy these machines. I mean, there's some very affordable, very accurate machines, for thousands of dollars. If you want to look at something similar to the Pantone, and there's a number of theirs. They use their own color standard, so you kind of stuck with that. But they're all using the same kind of technology as far as their electronics and the optics and things like that are all very similar. Everybody's pretty keyed in on how all this stuff gets done.
And if you can hear me, I just want to say one thing to answer that question. I think Richard Judge is a segue in September when he gives a talk. His talk plus yours, and a little bit of a few other things, I think really could be a good synthesis moving forward to do this. So I think Richard Judge's next talk would be a good segue to the last question.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I like
Clive
the different.
Levinson, did you have your hand up? Clive?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I had it up briefly. I was just going to mention two things. The one is I take a sort of fairly pragmatic approach to color matching. And Stamp said he gives a delta E value, which is the difference between colors. And I think that is what people should be looking at. For example, I collect doubleheads, halfpenny green doubleheads, about 6 different shades. After collecting quite a few, I established what I think are the correct colors to match the catalog values described by Stanley Gibbons. I've now scanned those, put them in a library. Now, every time I get a halfpenny doublehead, I scan it and I match it against my library. I don't look for an exact match. I look for the closest match. It's unlikely that you're going to get an exact match between so many different stamps and shades. The catalogs, might have 6 different colors in the catalog, but it doesn't mean there were actually only 6 different printed. So I think looking for the exact match is problematic. And then going back to the expertising groups and that, they mainly, from what I understand, use reference copies to compare against. They're not using things like color keys or anything like that. And somebody mentioned earlier the King's Collection in Britain. I think that is probably very useful for those who have access to it. Unfortunately, us in the colonies don't. And I'm just about to rush off. I am late. And thank you, Stan. Very interesting. Thanks, Rob and Joan, for facilitating. It was great.
Thank you, Clive.
You're welcome. One point that I would make to your comments, which I agree, with respect to finding a color. Keep in mind that it's been agreed upon by the International Illuminatic Commission, IEC. I didn't say that right, but that's what I'm speaking of. Is that if the color is within a certain delta E range from it, then it is considered to be the same color. So it doesn't have to be a dead exact match. And I have, for that matter, sampled some blocks of stamps, coin dates, things like that. So we know that they're all printed at the same day on the same machine, and yet I can find a variation on there. They all come within range, but I don't get exactly the same identical number from one stamp to the next. But I think if we have targets, which is what the color values actually become, I think that basically gives us a much better tool than, well, I know my old eyes don't see all that well by squinting at it, and I've certainly squinted at enough damn stamps, and got big magnifiers, and I've tried all kinds of different ways, before I actually got into discovering PerfoMaster is the one that was like, whoa, you mean I can just put this on there and find a little sample area and it's going to tell me something? It wouldn't tell me what color it was, but I had to name it myself. But this is a start. This is a whole lot better than the color keys. And no disrespect to Stanley Gibbons or Michelle, but the color keys don't work worth a damn. They're just I just had very poor luck with them. Very seldom have I ever come up with a match, and I've seen more people post images of, here's the color key and here's my stamp, and I'm just looking at it going, oh, that doesn't look like that color at all. I know, is it me? Maybe maybe I'm that far off in my color vision, but
no, you've been there.
Yeah, so I think it's a tool. Up to this point, we really haven't had anything other than subjectivity to determine what color is what, and the catalog, taking them for the gospel truth that they say that there's only 2 or 3 color shades. I'm sorry, I'm finding evidence that there's a whole lot more, a broader range of colors out there than what's published in the catalog.
Oh yeah. All right, Ruhit, see now you have your hand up.
Yeah. Hi, Stanley. It was really a nice talk. I just graduated from a PhD. It's in engineering field, and I'm a very new into stamp collection. And I'm just wondering, is there any textbook that you can suggest, like to know more about what is the importance of color identification in stamps?
Ooh. Anybody want to field that? I'm not aware of any that have gone into any detail of it. And there are some people. In fact, I sometimes envy the people that, if the catalog says it only red is the only color, and they find a red stamp and they put it in their album and they're done and they move on. Sometimes I greatly envy those kind of people. Whereas and I was
ignorance is
early
bliss.
on, it was that way. I was just looking to cover it, to fill the square. I got the square. It's kind of like the match game, and then it was getting into England, Great Britain, early Great Britain, is where I first started trying to discern some of the different colors. I still, for the like of me, don't know what lake color is. I just adding that to a color, and it just means absolutely. Whose lake? I mean, a real clean lake, a dirty lake. I mean, a rough lake. I mean, we in the tropics. Where are we? So as soon as I went down that rabbit hole, I started noticing that not only did different catalogs do not agree. Stanley Gibbons doesn't agree on the same stamp that Scott does, that Weber and Tellier or Michelle do. I mean, in some cases they may have a common color between them. Some of them may say that there's 2 color varieties. One of them may say there's only one. One may say there's none. So who are you supposed to believe? So you really have to kind of pick somebody. In my case, I have a whole bookshelf full of almost everybody's catalogs, just so I can see how many people say what they are to try to get an idea. And you would think, like Scott or Gibbons would work great for me because English is my native language, and I think they frustrate me the most. But so I don't know of any specific book that would
Yeah, there's a good
Stan-
book called Color in Philately, and I think the Collectors Club have it, and there's some other places they have even sold it. It's a little bit outdated, but has all the fundamentals there and all the theory behind colors.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can
there's
find it on Amazon or eBay used.
Mhm.
It's
Martin mentioned
expensive.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Okay. Thank you so much for letting me know,
Thanks for that, Martin.
There's also a book on the biology of color. And I did some work on bird colors many years ago, and some of the same frustrations that it's such a continuum, and then how do you decide on exactly what color it is when you're writing up scientific results?
Yeah, just to share, I also have this book which I was reading, the Philatelic Book of Secrets. So I was wanted to know any other book. So thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, it's good that we're compiling all these different examples. We need one place to look, even
Indeed,
though there isn't such a thing.
Well,
indeed.
Darren, what I might do is some of these resources, if we could put them on your forum, because that seems a more appropriate place than the British Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could certainly. I think there's a lot of inspired brains here this evening, and I obviously we care. We care because we want to be able to communicate our findings on the same using the same language, the same descriptors, and we need to do that. And I'm very, very happy to form a reference. We'll call it a subtopic, but it'll be a color. How about a color reference where we can put all our heads together and just throw stuff in there and use it as a place to look at.
Like someone has come up with some great list of books on the topic. So a reference like that, somewhere to put, here are some of the good books on color.
Yep.
Think so that way they're not just if you don't watch the YouTube or you don't read the chat, it's gone. So it should live somewhere in a group that's really specializes in this.
And the only reason I collect stamps is because of color. So there you go.
Can I just say something, please? There's a book called The Inks of Delarue and Co., 1850 to 1910. And that's got all the recipes for the inks that they used. And for example, one of the countries I collect, in an 18-month period, for one value stamp, they changed the recipe for that stamp 3 times. But this is a book. I don't know if you can see it.
If you take a look, I'm going to interject here. It's I can think of it as a form of reverse engineering. If you actually are able to take a stamp and then get the specific digify it its color with a number, you might be able to even figure out, looking back, as to what the recipe was used and when that stamp was printed, even if you just have a stamp with no cancel on it. It's really cool ways of using digital philately, and I think we are on the cusp of some really interesting aspects of our.
There's one other aspect as well, of course. It depends whether the ink they was using was doubly fugitive or singly fugitive. It's completely different. The doubly fugitive tends to be quite dense. You don't see the paper, whereas on the singly fugitive, the paper behind will affect the color.
Stan, I know I don't have my hand up, but I was wanting to ask you this about half an hour ago. You say you spray painted your little cover on the back of your scanner black. My question is because there's so much light hitting the stamp, do you think you'll get a different color? Yeah, it's awesome. You'll get a different color response or color answer when you're scanning your stamps because you have a black background and the thinness of the stamp.
Well, I have something to say about that. I had a Canon 300 IEE. When I got back into stamps and discovered that scanners could make the stamp much bigger and much easier for me to see than me trying to look through, a loop or my old childhood magnifying glass. And the Great Queen Victoria Great Britain lilacs all showed up great. No matter how, and I bought ViewScan, no matter how I adjusted that, I could start to get a hint of the lilac, but I could never get rid of the gray. And so I don't remember if I read something or someone said something to me, but I went out and I bought for craftspeople, it's like 250 different sheets of different colored paper. It's all printed on a pastel. And so I proceeded to put the different colors of paper behind the stamp. And lo and behold, when I put a nice pale yellow background behind it, bingo, I had a lilac scan on that. And so the background color definitely has an impact on scanners. I think it's part of their algorithm is how they put everything together. In this case, I was surprised that it made that big of a difference, but obviously I couldn't go around constantly changing backgrounds, on there. So that made me decide that maybe I need a different scanner. But that was just the weakness in that particular scanner. Had a problem with that color until
What color black? Excuse me. What color black did you use to spray paint your background?
I think it's just a black matte finish from the hardware store. Nothing specific. It may well have been whatever happened to be out on the shelf the day that I decided, because I got tired of putting the black paper, Scotch tape, because a few times, or the masking tape was coming up in my scans, which was annoying me. So I thought I'm just gonna, the heck with it. I don't scan anything with white. Although now I have a white background as well if I need it. But spray paint, let it out in the sun, and what?
Stan, would we all need that same black background to be comparable?
No, because the black background mainly comes in for the contrast for doing perforations, for checking perf, because you're not really checking that part of it. Now, I suppose if you had a stamp that had extremely thin paper, this could be an issue, but thus far in the stamps that I've dealt with France so far, I haven't had anything that's been quite that, thin. Mince paper. I mean, they do refer to a mince or semi-transparent, but I have not found any examples of it, so I'm still not really sure what it is. Other than, if I soak the stamp, some of them you can kind of see right through them until they dry out. The same goes with like the Queen Victoria, the penny reds.
Yeah,
become really translucent when they're wet. But then as soon as they dry, they're back to normal. So I suppose the background could play a part in it. However, as long as you're consistent, that's another reason for not changing the settings on your scanner, from one setting to the next, because now I'm scanning red stamps and I know that the scanner does a better job if I do this to it, so it looks better to my eye.
I think, if I may add, you mentioned that maybe in the 5th or 10th slide, that if you set the number of pixels that you use to select the color, you said there were advantages and disadvantages for going small and large. I would say that one of the disadvantages for using the large option would be that you could actually get some background color that you weren't anticipating into calculation.
Yeah, one school of thought is you get more averaging or filtering, with a larger field. But I tend to like something smaller. I like at most maybe a 10 by 10, and even sometimes smaller than that. Mainly because I'm kind of looking for more precision placement to make sure that, you know, I'm not near a pore. You know, I don't, like on some of, like, say, the green stamps, you can see the pigmentation. In fact, in a lot of the stamps, if you know, from a distance they look great, but if you magnify them up, and this is not pixelation from your, you know, from your image itself, because I scanned a huge number of stamps for a long time at 3,200 DPI, which, you know, I had an awful lot of patience just to sit there and wait for these things to scan. But, you know, those you can blow up incredibly large before they even begin to show signs of the pixels itself. And there really is, in a lot of the, you have to realize ink colors is a mixture of pigments. And we need to remember that it's a mixture. You know, commercial paint manufacturers have typically put their paint through, after they mix the standard colors, through homogenizers to try to give it maximum shelf life, because the different pigments have different weights and they will settle out. And we all know that from, you know, opening up a can of paint that we bought 2 weeks ago, that we got to stir it up. Some colors are up on the top around the edge, and other ones, you know, are farther down in until you stir it up. So I think the same thing probably holds true for inks. You know, it's a mixture. They're not going to be a homogeneous blend of color, no matter how well they're mixed. At least not 100 years ago. Maybe now, modern day now. You know, I don't know how much of of our modern stamps, how much of it's dry powder, you know, or how much actual ink they actually use anymore. Everything seems to have gone to more of a laser type approach with a very high volume.
Okay, do we have any other questions out?
Well, to those of you still here, thank you. This has gone on a long time, but that's okay. You have my emails on the presentation. You can find me on the stamp forum. I'm always happy to engage in conversations. Listen to counter points of view to mine. Tell me where I'm wrong. You know, it's pretty hard to hurt my feelings. Believe me, at 31 years and with large corporations, there's not very much that phases me. So just have at it. But I would love to engage with other people. You know, get into a study group devoted to this would be great, because I really think it takes more people. You know, it takes a village here to really come up with some ideas and find something that is a kind of a little more easily digested. I realize that Stamp Z is probably overkill for a great many people. You know, this is probably a whole lot more than they ever wanted to get into, just to find out what a color is. But you know.
Well, Stan, we're climbing the slippery slope, and it's an important thing that we're starting, you know, and you've contributed greatly to it.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, I've enjoyed it. And like I said, for me, this is much an extension of the hobby, just in another way. So I have no expectations to monetize anything. You know, this is just anyway.
all right.
We call it a wrap.
I think we should call it a wrap. For those of you, you know, next month, I'm not sure if you like plating, but we're doing that. But come back for Richard Judge on a different approach to to studying stamps. He has some equipment that I really would love to have, but I keep saying that, so maybe he'll leave me in his will. Like,
Yeah.
and I bequeath to
I've heard
Joan
that
my
before, yes.
spectrometers, right? Anyway, wishful thinking. So thank you all, and good night. And Stan, thank you. That was really fascinating.
Thank you, Stan.
Welcome. You're welcome.
So,
Thanks,
and
everybody.
thank you, everybody. Okay, good night.